Thanks a lot, guys, for coming to our presentation. We really appreciate it. So today we're going to give you just a whole bunch of feedback and tools, we hope, on ways that you can keep disease out of your shelter. We're also going to then have BARC talk to you about what they did to keep disease out of the shelter after Austin Pets Alive had come in and visited with them and offered them some suggestions. So why are we doing this? Well, death, disease, and community issues. We often are called in because of crisis. We are hoping that at this point we are able to talk to everybody about being proactive. You don't want to have to call AMPA 911. You want to be able to say, we just want to be proactive. What can we do to keep disease out of our shelter? So we're going to go through all of that and help you guys with that.
So current research now indicates that the distemper parvo vaccine it provides immunity within the first 72 hours. So by day 4 in a shelter, dogs are not going to die of distemper. We're not saying it's going to prevent distemper because we know that that's not possible. But if we can keep them safe for the first 72 hours that they're in a shelter and exposed to the diseases that we see in shelters, then they won't get to the point where they're dying of distemper. You're seeing the bad neurological, really debilitating effects that distemper can have on these dogs. So this was published on NCBI. And it was written by Doctors Larson and Schultz. So you can Google this information. It's known, it's out there. So you can just literally pull it up, Google it, show it to whoever you want to show it to. This is from Dr. Kate Hurley from UC Davis. So she's also saying that in her experience, shelters that prevent spread of disease in the first 72 hours do not see the level of disease that is possible and that's out there. So if we can keep dogs safe, we have clean clothes when we're treating them, we have clean supplies, we have clean transport trucks, they're not going to get sick and die from distemper. So FERCP works much the same way. So for panleukopenia, cats can begin mounting an immune response to panleuk pretty much immediately and have full immunity within 3 days. So we know that kittens are going to have possibly interfering maternal antibodies, but adult cats, if you vaccinate them and you keep them safe for those 3 days, you're not going to have your panleuk outbreaks. So panleukopenia is feline distemper, so this does also affect cats, and it can help keep cats safe as well.
So 2 methods that we have been going around and working with so many shelters on, we call them the intake by day and the snaking method. This has been working at each shelter that we've gone to. There's been some trial and errors, there's been some changes back and forth, but if we can do one of these 2 methods, we have actually seen an increase in healthy animals and a decrease in disease. Obviously, the goal is we want to reduce the contact between the naive population and your older population, which means your general population. And we also want our dogs and our cats to have some degree of vaccinations in them, preferably, of course, the whole 72 hours. Some shelters can do longer, other shelters can only do the 72 hours. But we really want to make sure that we keep our naive animals away from our general population. And naive obviously just means your brand new intakes. So right here's an example of an intake by day. So what you have is you have 3 different pods, and you have everybody that comes in on one day stays in one pod. The next day is designated of that day, and then the same thing with the next day. When I was at Palm Valley Animal Center, we actually called it green day, yellow day, and red day, and it made it very easy to know it wasn't, this is whatever day and all of that kind of stuff. So if you have a way to designate green, yellow, red, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or something like that. I'll show you an example in a little while of something that Broward County is doing. They actually attach a sign that it's laminated, you can write on it, and it says these animals came in on this day and they can leave on this day. And it moves room to room as it's happening. So in order to do the day by day, you do need to have at least 3 separate spaces because you need to have a place that each group can stay for the whole 3 days. So it really works best if you have a place that this whole unit moves out and they go to like what we call a day 4 space. So you need to have at least 3 separate intake spaces, and then you need to be able to have them stay there for the whole 72 hours. They're not having to be moved. They're handled by different staff members. Volunteers are not coming in there. And then you have to have a place that on day 4, that entire group moves out to.
Cats, don't move your cats. Cats don't like to be moved around in kennels. So for cats, you have to do the intake by day. So if you need to find spaces to put your cats. So you have your day 1, your day 2, your day 3. You do an all in, all out. I don't know how many of you guys went to the nursery. Okay, so all in, all out. You fill up a cat room. The end of the day, you shut it down. They stay in there for 3 days, and then they move out on day 4, just like dogs. So we know that, dogs, disease is spread most often dog to dog. With cats, it's people. So they need to have their own supplies. They need to have their own set of equipment that they're working in, so you're not spreading disease inadvertently between rooms. On day 4, all the cats have to leave, right? They all have to leave to adoption, rescue, so that you can make space for new cats coming in that day. All kittens should be vaccinated at 4 weeks and a pound. Don't vaccinate them if they're under a pound. If you have a litter of kittens, wait till the smallest one weighs 1 pound, then vaccinate them all. But so they can start mounting that immune response, right? We know that their kittens aren't going to have the full effect, but we want to get those vaccines on as soon as possible. Hours make a big difference. So don't wait until they're in the shelter and then vaccinate them. Vaccinate them on their way into the shelter. And this includes feral cats too. If it needs to go IM, it can go IM. Dr. J, I know you've said that's okay. It just needs to go IC in cat. So get those feral cats vaccinated as well. And again, we know kittens aren't going to be fully immune within 3 days, but we need to start building their ability to fight these viruses that they get confronted with in shelters. But definitely cats should not be moved every day. They shouldn't go through the snaking process that we'll talk about. You need to designate them a space where they can go to during their stray hold, their vaccine hold, before they move out into general population.
So the second thing that we've worked with on shelters is the snake method. So the snake method is for shelters that have just one giant area of intake area. So you have a place where you start for an intake and you just kind of roll into an adoption. So what we do is we say, let's start at point A, and we snake all the way through. You can see this diagram. Here's one that we actually did. This one was at City of Dallas. And actually, this one was City of Dallas, I'm sorry. The other one was Las Cruces. So this is how we did it in Dallas. They obviously had to go from a holding area into kind of a different pod section. I will say that right now, Dallas is using pods at a time, so they're doing by day. So like I said, if you have a large intake room area, then the snaking works. If you think about it like a bank teller or an airport security line, that's kind of how the snaking is. You go into the airport and you have to do all that walking through and wrapping through, even if there's only 2 people in line in front of you. You just keep circling through and circling through and circling through. That's what we're talking about for an intake area. This allows for the dogs to always have the same neighbors. So just in case on that one day a dog was sick and they exposed their neighbor, they never expose somebody that's come in the next day. They always have the same neighbors. They all just keep sliding down. And by the time that they reach the exit, it's ready to go to general population. The 72 hours have already happened. They're post-vaccinated. So it's a really good method to do if you don't have separate rooms to hold enough animals in. A big thing that you have to think about whenever you're doing the snake method is you do have animals that leave they leave for medical rescues, you have owner surrender reclaims, you end up with animals going to rescue, which is amazing. So when the cleaning process begins, you need to smoosh down, and we really do mean smoosh down. So don't take the empty kennel and put another dog in it. Keep moving the animals all the way down. That way, by the time that you get all the way to the end, you have all your empty kennels for your new intake. You never want to just spot fill in because you've now exposed the animals again. It's a lot of movement. BARC is going to talk to you about how it does work, though. I've gone to several shelters that said it's a lot of work for them, and then when they've actually tried it, they've said, you know, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. We were already cleaning anyways, and this worked for us. And we also recommend that the only sharing of kennels during the 72-hour period are the ones that came in on the same day, preferably even the ones that came in on the same animal control truck. Obviously, animal control trucks are a big disease spread. They have, you know, they don't have enough barriers in them. They share the same airspace, so you don't know if the dog you've picked up in the field might have distemper or not. So if you see that the dogs look friendly and social and they're tail wagging, and you know you're a shelter that can only make it on space capacity if you double and triple up, then go ahead and try to do them right off the truck, so you're really keeping it even more limited rather than giving them a single kennel and then filling in as more dogs come in throughout the day. So we have some exceptions to this rule. Obviously, returns. So if you've gone through a disease outbreak and you've had distemper in your shelter, you need to be very careful about returns. We do not want returns within that sick period to go into the snaking or your new day-by-day intake. You want them to go straight out to general population. Also, if you have owner surrenders that have proof of vaccine from a reputable, reliable source, so they bring you your shot records, whatever they do, they also can go join general population because they're already protected. It needs to be a current vaccine. It needs to be within their time period, their 1 year period, unless they're a puppy and they need to have multiple of them. You just don't want to put them in with your naive population when they can go straight out to the healthy population.
So a couple rules of thumb. No matter what method you're using, these things should always be done and be actively trained to staff and all of that. So sick dogs and cats are not intaked where healthy dogs and cats are. You can't have that puppy that came in with parvo and then you have another puppy that comes in right behind that. If you can identify sick animals in the intake line, right? People line up. There's people everywhere. They have their dogs, they have their cats. They need to be kept separate, and we need to intake them in separate spaces. We at Austin Pets Live do a lot of car exams. Make them wait in their car. Just keep them outside of the shelter. Make them wait by the tree that's in the corner, whatever it takes to keep those animals apart from each other. So if you have one sick one, they're not contaminating or getting the other animals sick before they even make it into the shelter. Defer intake as much as possible. You do want to learn your law on this one. So what I mean by defer intake is somebody finds a stray animal, they bring it to the shelter. The first thing you should ask is, can you keep it for 3 days? We're going to vaccinate it today. You may deworm it. Depending on your shelter, you can do whatever preventatives you want to do. But if they can take that animal back home for those 72 hours and do the vaccine hold, that is ideal, because then they're not exposed to any disease in those first few days, and they get cared for. They're better animals when they make it back into the shelter. And a lot of them don't even make it back into the shelter. They may decide they're okay keeping it, and they fell in love with it in those 3 days, and that's great. But learn your law. You need to find out what impound actually means, what in custody actually means, because ordinances can differ. No mingling before intake. So again, keep them 15 to 20 feet apart at all times. When dogs cough, they can aerosolize that far. So you want to make sure that they're not standing in a line. They should be standing in corners of the room, waiting in their cars. You want to prevent the mingling of any animals. New intake in naive population dogs cannot cross the path of your general population dogs. If this means they don't get a walk in the first 3 days, then that's okay. And I think that can be tough on staff, that can be tough on volunteers, but you have to think those first 3 days are much more important than the risk of them getting disease in your shelter. If you have a dog that's truly potty trained, he goes right outside of his kennel and then he goes right back in. But they should not be at risk for crossing any paths. If you have to map out walkways, which we have done at a lot of shelters, we just ask, where do the dogs walk? Where do they go potty? Where do general population dogs go potty? Just thinking about all those chances where they might walk across another dog in the shelter and be exposed. So if that means you don't walk them, you just don't walk them. It's tough, but it's life or death, so obviously life is the best choice. Think about where your euthanasia room is. Is it in your regular kennel area? When you're walking dogs to be euthanized for illness, are they walking past your other dogs? Are they walking past your general population dogs? Are they walking past your 72-hour dogs? So just keeping that in mind. I've gone to what I think is now commonly referred to as a hostage method, where you literally just throw a towel, a blanket, something over these animals' faces so they cannot come into that contact. And if they're coughing, they're sneezing, it's not going to hit the other animals. Thinking about common supplies like poop scoops, the stuff that we don't even think about. You know, you're going scoop and poop kennel to kennel. That's a mode of transmission right there. So you can have separate supplies, you can color code. It's super effective. I was just at a shelter in Minnesota and they color coded everything. It worked perfect. So just keep in mind all of those little areas where there's possible cross-contamination. This is a huge rule of thumb, huge. Vaccines have to happen before they enter the shelter. Cats and dogs should not be vaccinated once they have hit their kennel. There should be a line. You can put duct tape down on the floor, whatever it takes, but they should not be vaccinated once they've entered the shelter. It needs to be on the way in. It needs to be in their car, maybe, in the lobby area. But when we mean before they enter, we literally mean before they enter, because we know that hours matter. Hours matter to these animals' lives. And so we need to do the best that we can to prevent them from being naive and being exposed to a virus. We vaccinate when we believe that vaccinating every animal is important. It's key. And when we mean every animal, we really mean every animal. Fever, sick, pregnant, injured, doesn't matter. Worst case scenario, the vaccine doesn't work. That stinks. But best case scenario, they're getting something from that vaccine that's going to help them, and that something might save their life. So we really do vaccinate everything. I'm going to let Dr. J talk a little bit more about that. In neonates.
Yeah, so in a distemper outbreak, we were trying to get really creative because so many dogs were dying of exposure during the hurricane and then afterwards working with different shelters. And so I did a lot of research around whether or not you can vaccinate puppies as soon as they're born, because there's so many puppies that are coming into municipal shelters with their mom or being born in the shelter during their 3 days. And then we were having almost 100% death rate for those puppies because they're getting distemper so young and they're not vaccinatable. And so I couldn't find any research that actually proves that it's dangerous to puppies to vaccinate them. And I called Muriel to ask them, and the veterinary researchers there did a publication review, and they couldn't find anything either. So it's sort of we don't know. There's no research out there. There's no research that says it's safe, but there's also no research that says it's not safe. So I think when you're facing certain death for neonates because you have an active outbreak, I would vaccinate them. And I haven't followed recently in Houston, but I know we did several litters and 100% of them lived. So that was during the outbreak when 100% were dying, we vaccinate and 100% lived. So I think it's worth considering if it's a really dire situation.
So this is just from AAFP and AHA, where they recommend pregnancy and mild illnesses are not contraindicated in vaccines. Those animals need to be vaccinated. They're just as at risk, and if you're not vaccinating them, they're going to be the animals that are starting the outbreak because they're immune. So if you don't believe us, there's also just published information out there. If you Google and you just keep searching, you can find the information if you need something to take to your directors, to your vets, to prove that we really need to be doing this because it saves lives and it makes a difference. So here we have a video. This was at a shelter that we visited, and it's just animal control officers, but they're vaccinating the dogs before they enter the shelter. So we wanted to show this. They literally just came off the truck, and they're getting vaccinated before that dog ever enters that shelter. he's vaccinated. It's so important. We can't stress how important it is. Yeah, so this shelter, they did the entire intake outside. They have tech. So this dog came in off of an ACO truck. They have a tech outside that does the quick exam, make sure that they're not suffering from anything, make sure they're generally healthy, and get those vaccines in. And then he can go into his kennel for the 3 days and then go into general population after that. So they take the photos so they can start getting them marketed. That looks like a St. Bernard mix. Somebody's going to want it. So get those photos out as soon as possible also.
So the big thing that happens in a lot of shelters that think that they're doing everything correct, you really do. Like your management feels like, I know that my people are doing vaccines on intake. I know that we're doing things right. Unfortunately, we have the human component. So I have visited several shelters where the managers told me, yep, we're vaccinating on intake. And I find out that they mean, well, we're putting them in holding, and then we vaccinate when we can get to them. But that's upon intake because it's their first day. That's not correct. So vaccinating on intake really does mean before they enter the shelter. I've also visited some shelters where they feel like they're storing the vaccines properly. They might have them in an ice chest with ice packs and not replacing the ice packs. So we have to look at things like that. You really do need to have a refrigerator every place that you're doing intake. So if you have a lobby intake for your owner surrenders and your found dogs that are coming in from a public finder, you need to have a refrigerator there. If you have a separate area where your animal control dogs are being vaccinated, you need to have a separate refrigerator there. It's very hard to remind people to put new ice packs in every 2 hours. You know, they'd almost have to have a timer set on their phone that says ice pack. Also, vaccines cannot be drawn up early. They're really only good for about 20 minutes. I did visit a shelter that felt like they were doing a great job, and they were doing a good job. They were drawing up vaccines in the morning, though, and using them all day long. So we had to go through and do some revaccines. Boosters. We've visited multiple shelters where people are not doing boosters. Boosters are vital. I know a lot of shelters feel like, well, the animal's not going to be here for 14 days, so we're not going to worry about it. You don't know that. That animal could be with you for 14 days. So you need to go ahead when you're entering the vaccine in your system. You need to have a way that calendars it out for a booster, and you can get a report out of whatever database you're using that says, here's everybody that's due for a booster today. Adults, we actually do at Austin Pets Live, we recommend the adult also receives a booster, and that's their annual vaccine at that point, because we don't know the vaccination history of these adult dogs coming in. This might be the first time they've ever gotten a vaccine, and we want to make sure that we have a healthy, fully vaccinated adult dog. Obviously, puppies and kittens under 5 months old, they need to get those boosters. Neonates, Dr. Jefferson just kind of touched on it already. If they're born in the shelter, you need to vaccinate them upon birth. Pregnant dogs, cats, we've already talked about all of that. So the quarantine period, the 72 hours, the no walks, that has caused some issues at some of the shelters. A lot of shelters I go to, they don't have enough volunteers to do the dog walking, so it's not always a big issue. But at some shelters, they have a very active volunteer system, and they want to have volunteers help, and the volunteers want to walk the dogs. You can't. On these, unless you have a space that each dog can go to by itself, and then you clean that space, those dogs cannot go in and out. They need to stay in their kennel. It's horrible, you poop scoop, maybe you have in and out kennels and it's fine, they go outside and they poop, whatever, but you have to protect them. So I know it feels inhumane, but you're actually being more humane because you're giving them a better chance to live. Non-staff members should not be allowed to go in your 72-hour naive population area unless they're escorted. I was at a shelter where people are allowed to just go in and out, and I had to constantly ask people to stop touching the dogs because they're just going dog to dog to dog to dog. So if I've got day 1 dogs on the beginning of my snake, and I've got day 2 dogs in the middle and day 3 at the end, and you touch all my dogs, I just have spread possibly something to all my dogs. So it needs to be an area that you can have somebody escorted if they're looking for their animal, and it cannot be made to open just to the general public to walk in and out of. We want them to be available. We don't want you to not allow those people to look for their dog or people to look at wanting to adopt a dog, but we want you to have an escort for that person so we can make sure that they're doing it safely. Some of the shelters need to stop volunteers from going in, or at least have some very strict guidelines for volunteers. I've watched a couple of shelters where volunteers walk in and they give treats, and instead of dropping the treat in on the top of the cage so that they're not touching the dog, they're putting the treat in the dog's mouth, and then they go to the next cage and do the same thing, and the next cage, never washing their hands, not changing gloves in between. So there you have another breakdown by a human for that.
Say one clarification is that we do recommend waiting on vaccines in kittens until they're 4 weeks, because it does, I don't know if there was a study, but we feel like we've seen enough kittens that are vaccinated under 4 weeks break with panleukopenia. So I believe that is true. But the puppies, we haven't seen any puppies break with parvo from getting a vaccine at birth, even the minute they're dropped. No, we have not seen that. We always vaccinate the moms. Because there's no research, so the question was, do you vaccinate puppies, newborn puppies, if there is an outbreak, or only if there's an outbreak, or even all the time? And right now, I would say just during an outbreak, and just try to focus on getting those puppies out of your shelter under normal circumstances so they're not there, because they're susceptible to everything. They shouldn't be in the shelter at all if possible.
I'm sorry, I recommend that we hold the questions towards the end, because there's a lot more.
Yeah, that's okay. Just write them down, don't forget, and we'll answer them.
Thank you.
So a big thing that we recommend to every shelter we go to is in-car exams for sick fosters, foster to adopts, anybody that has left your shelter that is not owned by the owner. We have had some resistance from shelters where they've said it's just not possible. But I'd like to show you Las Cruces, New Mexico, where it's quite possible. This is a shelter that is under massive construction. Their place is a construction zone, and you have detour signs everywhere and special sidewalks to walk on and the whole thing. Yet, at this shelter, no dog is allowed inside their lobby, period. Even if it's being surrendered, no dog is allowed in that lobby. So the people have to park in a very remote parking lot. They walk all through the sidewalk. They go in, they check in, they go back and sit in their car. And Dr. Susan from Las Cruces goes out and does the sick checks. She does this on every single sick check. There's no sick check that comes inside of her shelter at all. So it is possible, because this is a small shelter under a lot of construction with one vet to do the vet checks, and it's happening. It's a really good way to keep disease out of your shelter. It's wise to only have an ill animal come into your shelter if you're taking it straight to your medical ISO area where it's being hospitalized because it's that sick that it does need some hospitalization. Another big thing that we talk about is kind of having a flow manager, a gatekeeper, somebody that's actually making sure the animals are going to the right location. And what that means is an animal comes off the animal control truck, and you've scanned it for a microchip, you found a microchip, you look up the microchip on your system, and you find out that that dog was here 3 months ago. Well, that dog's not going to join your naive population. That dog's going to go to your general population. The gatekeeper is going to sign off on where that dog is going. You scan it, there's no chip. We're going to assume it's new naive population. We're going to make sure it's vaccinated, and then the gatekeeper is going to sign off that they saw it was vaccinated, they're giving it a kennel assignment, and they're initialing it. This is a very simple little card that can be used. It doesn't have to be a massive process. So I just wanted to give you an example of something that's handwritten and super easy, and you don't have to go through making a whole entire publication to make it happen. End of day reports are huge. I was helping Austin Animal Center for several months, and one thing that worked really well was for me to send out an end of the day report to all of the managers that were involved, that had departments involved in the intake process. So I would sit there at night and I would say, these are the animals that need to move into these kennels from the holding. These are the animals that need to move out. These are animals that need to move into the ISO area. These are the empty kennels available for tomorrow. How many dogs were in offices and, conference rooms, things like that. And then also be able to address issues of concern. So, oops, a dog got put into holding that wasn't supposed to have been put into holding. We need to consider this group, today's group, possibly exposed. Let's watch this group. And it was just a way to be able to communicate to each department so they could find out what might be going wrong in their department's part of the intake process and be able to talk with their staff about how to make things smoother, what they might not have understood with the new processes, things like that. So I highly recommend that EODs are sent out from whoever you've designated as your gatekeeper, your flow manager, your intake person, anything like that, that might be able to let your shelter manager, your operations manager, your vet staff, anybody like that know what has gone on that day so that they have an idea of what they need to be looking out for. One of the shelters that we went to, this was City of Odessa. City of Odessa had what they thought was a distemper outbreak. They thought they were going to have to euthanize all the dogs in their custody, and we were able to get in there and help them. They did not have to euthanize any of the dogs in their custody. We were able to get rescue groups to come in and help out a lot. A lot of animals went off to rescue, foster, adoptions. But we were able to clear out their entire intake room, hard scrub it, and we were ready to start trying to do the snaking process when we realized that their kennels backed up to each other with this barbed wire, and there was no way to actually give a barrier for the days. So Lieutenant Kevin Chance, who was overseeing the shelter, decided let's put some plexiglass in there. So he's now inserted plexiglass into those little barbed wire cage spaces so that now there is a way to block any kind of transformation from each other, and we're able to actually do the snaking method there in their intake room. These were just some of the things that we wanted to show you. Here was the sign that I was talking about from Broward County, where they're able to say this is the day in, this is the day they can leave. This sign is posted on the way into the kennels. It says no unvaccinated dog or no unvaccinated animals beyond this point, and they mean it.
So this is a video of the snaking method. I don't know if you can hear it.
So these guys, they get moved, right?
So these guys are today.
Yes. So they usually have the numbers, the 1, 2, 3, I don't know what happened. And everybody should match, right? Mm-hmm. So I call this corner up to the safe zone. Now I've noticed that when they cross the corner, like about half, they start showing clinical signs.
Okay.
But a slight cough or a slight sneeze. So when they get at the end, it's where they're coughing. So what I'm doing is that at half of the cage, I'm doing prophylactic treatment.
Okay.
So what I wanted to point out in that video is that the dogs are still, they're in the shelter day 3, they're still coughing and sneezing. That's okay. We're not saying they're not going to get sick. They're going to get sick. They might get sick. They're probably going to get sick. That's okay. You can still start the medications, get them treated, but they're not, this is a method to prevent them from dying of distemper. We can protect them, we can save them if we have the right policies and procedures in place. So that if they do get the virus, it's not progressing. So it's okay. She's saying they're coughing, they're sneezing, but that's all that's happening. She's not getting any dogs that are coming down with full-blown distemper, becoming neurological and dying after that. So the method that these two methods, we know we're not preventing disease. We can't prevent it, it's a shelter. But we can protect the dogs as best we can so that they're not getting the very terrible distemper that we know is out there and can happen. Here's just 2 quotes from 2 different shelters, Lieutenant Kevin Chance in Odessa and Jordan Craig in City of Dallas, that it works. When it's done right, it really does work. We know Dr. Hurley has said that she's seen it work in 72 hours. So if you can do these methods, we can prevent canine distemper, we can prevent feline panleuk, and help just keep these animals safer while they're in our custody and in our care. We have that obligation to them. Okay, we're gonna do a quick quiz. I was gonna throw candy at you, but I won't because I think I might hit your neighbors. So maybe we'll just run it out there. Okay, so who doesn't get vaccinated on intake? Anyone? Under what weight and age?
Nope, yep, see? I'm not a good thrower.
Great shot.
I'm not a good thrower.
Okay, so second question. Owner surrenders with proof of vaccines during the snake process. True or false?
Everybody. There's just a bunch of candy.
How long do you need to hold your naive population away from general population? Okay, so we're going to pass you off to Paula and Amelia, who are with BARC.
Hi, BARC, Animal Shelter and Adoptions. My name's Amelia and this is Paula. We're going to talk a little bit about everything we did after Hurricane Harvey. First, a little bit about us. Some quick facts. We are the city shelter, open admission for all dogs and cats, some livestock, some exotics, as we have room from animal control officers as they bring them in. Our intake is about 28,000 animals annually, and we have the capacity for 350 dogs and 160 cats.
So, as you can see here, it's a graph just showing, a table showing our live release rate. Over the years, you can see there's been an increase. So if you look closely, you can see for September and October, this is after Hurricane Harvey, there's a huge increase, and this was due to the rescues and fosters, pulling through our community, pulling through and coming and just emptying out the shelter since we had a December outbreak.
But I think overall, we've been really improving our live release rate since 2013, and that's hugely in part to a new adoption center. It's more public friendly and welcoming. We've got a bigger presence on social media, and we paired with a rescue partner that transports to Colorado. They've been a huge help. Some snapshots of the intake building, so you guys have an image of like what we're working with and what we had to work with, the space. We're primarily talking about dogs. We still haven't quite tackled cats, but they're coming. We're gonna do it. So we've got 4 main areas where the intake starts. Previously, these are the areas where animals were coming in. Wherever was open for intake, a dog would be put in all of the open spots. This is also the area where we then started the snake line. We have 2 adoption areas. Oh, I don't even know that. We have 2 adoption areas. So the one on the top, 4 rooms of adoptable animals. The one on the bottom is the newer adoption center that was open. We can hold about 20 dogs on one side and then puppies and small breeds on the other area.
Okay, so after Hurricane Harvey, we were receiving calls after calls with animals that were showing distemper symptoms. So like our title said, Houston, we have a problem. So we're like, okay, Austin, Dr. Ellen Jefferson, please help. We called her out. Her and her team came within like 2 days, so it was quick. They came out with her team, evaluated our protocols, our practices, and they gave us 3 goals that we would follow in order, to tackle this task. One was to treat dogs already afflicted. 2 was to stop the spread of disease by separating the exposed population from the new incoming ones. And then 3 was to prevent another outbreak by starting a new segregation or intake segregation and 100% intake vaccines, and then manage our intake numbers. So, number 1, treat animals already afflicted in the shelter. So with this one, and a lot of this is going to be repetitive, so because they presented and it was great.
We basically did everything they told us to do. So you're going to hear about that. Yeah.
So before we used to allow the sick animals to come in to our back lobby area, and the vet would go back there and they would look at it, and then we would treat it. So now we stopped that. No animals are allowed in the shelter if we know they're sick. We go out there, we send a vet tech out there, they assess it first, and then if they believe the vet needs to go out there, the vet will go out there, but absolutely no animals in the shelter if we know they're sick. The biggest challenge with this has been the weather condition, or was the weather conditions at that time. I remember, it would be hot, like 150 degrees weather in Houston, and our vet techs would have to go out there quickly, because, a lot of vehicles didn't have AC. It's just a lot of little challenges we faced. So another thing we didn't have in our shelter were protocols for our vet techs to follow when it came to distemper treatment. So APA gave us a really good protocol that we started implementing. A challenge there was our vet techs were so used to going to the vet, so that was a challenge at that time. We were still running to the vet. So what do you think? What do you think? So protocol, that was the challenge there. So our vets were
Doing everything.
Doing everything. They were doing our walkthroughs for shelters, they were doing surgeries, they were attending the foster clinics, they were entering their notes, they were attending the emergencies. So what we did, we have now adoption counselors, volunteer base. We have pretty much the staff stepped up and took away a lot of tasks that the vets really didn't necessarily have to do. We sat down, we decided what was the most important things for our vets to do, and so they now dedicate themselves to like the first time animal exams, surgeries of course, and then any complicated or non-routine illnesses that we see. Challenges there were, needing protocols for all the vets to follow. So it was just hard to get everyone on the same page since it was just it was a decision we had to make quick in order to save these animals' lives.
Point number 2, stop the spread of disease by separating everybody. We had a huge outpour of help from the community. They essentially emptied almost all of the shelter. We then had to set up incoming day 1, incoming day 2, incoming day 3, totally separate areas that have never been, areas that didn't hold animals before. So we had pop-up kennels in 3 different areas, and it was a challenge in communicating to all of the teams. All of the teams had to know where incoming day 1 was, where day 2, where day 3 was. And so on day 4, then they all moved into the adoption building. So it was the challenge was communicating to everybody that needed to know, cleaning areas that didn't have drains, paper towels, spray bottles. And then inventory, they weren't in cages, they were just in pop-up kennels. We had to figure out how to keep track of them and then how to, continue to keep track of them. Point number 3, prevent the outbreak by starting a new system of intake segregation, 100% vaccines, and manageable intake numbers. But we're gonna talk about what we did before, which was a big mess. So this is a picture of our lobby. This is our evaluation intake building. Our main lobby, everybody was coming in. If you were coming to BARC, you were coming through this lobby. Whether it was for intake, wellness, surgery pickups, everybody was coming through here. You can even see some of the stanchions right here that have lines. You'd line up in one line if you had cats, you'd line up in another if you had dogs. You'd be sitting over there in the chairs if you were here for public wellness option. So everybody was all mixed in. Animals were also accepted without question. We wanted to implement like a very fast and efficient, no questions asked, we'll take your animal, we're done. Okay, so once we got the animal, these 3 pictures are divided. This was our old intake area. So looking down the hallway to this first image, you'll have rooms off to your right and off to your left. Off to your right, let's just say it was the puppy intake. We had like pop-up cages in there, 4 long, 3 high. They'd be filled with puppies and small breeds. Area off to your left, you could have adult dogs. We would sometimes have up to 3 adult dogs in there, 1 on the scale, 1 tied to the wall, 1 being held by somebody that was still incoming or intaking all the data entry. So it was a little messy. And then our new intake area.
Okay, so managing the numbers. I'm gonna talk a little bit about managing numbers and then I'll go into the new intake. So it was very important for us to be able to manage the numbers coming into our shelter instead of having, a lobby full. We had no control pretty much. We had animals rush in, that lobby was full, animals everywhere, people everywhere. It was just chaos. So what we've done, we've actually converted our intake into a drive-through process. Everyone stays in their vehicle, and then we have 1 line where all our intakes come through. We have sick animals that drive through also, but we have a certain area separated for them to be treated outside. So they all stay in their car. what this has done is actually given us an opportunity to actually talk to the citizens one-on-one instead, because before it was just to see, our like front desk representatives booking them in, and that was it. Like, we didn't get any history about these animals. We didn't get, so it's actually
We
created.
didn't find out if, we could offer them anything so they could keep the animal. It was just a very fast transaction, and so now we're able to build on that.
Yeah, so, now we just educate. Now we educate them, we ask questions, we're able to offer them deferred intake, what they mentioned earlier in the presentation. So we actually love it. We love it. So current challenges, though, of course, a lot of citizens aren't able to keep an animal additional days. They're going to town, they're going out of town the next day. Of course, that's the number one excuse. And then
Doesn't matter what we offer them. They're
Nope.
still not
Nope,
able
nope,
to
nope.
help out.
We're having challenges. We're working on it. We're going to work really hard on offering medical resources. Something as simple as, there's a little pimple growing inside my dog's eye. I can't keep it. It's a cherry eye. Oh my goodness! And since it's here, we're going to spay it. And here you go. Go back home. It's like. So it's just little medical resources that I think we want to start offering and hopefully be able to offer soon. We're also working on appointment-based appointments for our owner surrenders.
Do you want to talk about the numbers? We talk about how hard it is for the deferred intake for citizens to help out and want to help out, but we actually had a huge number of people step up and help us out and keep the animal after we offered vaccines, and the minimal number of resources that we had to offer them. What were
So
the?
it was 27, a little over 2,700 animals that actually got deferred. People said, yes, I'm taking it home, I'll bring it back. We did a little more than just 3 days. We did a week. And there was a little piece of my frame of time that we did 2 weeks. We're like, hey, can you bring them back in 2 weeks? So we went back to 1 week.
How many came back?
And I think a little bit over 700 of them never came back to the shelter.
Yeah.
So-
It sounds little, but it's actually huge, and so that's why we're continuing to do it. And I think the opportunity to talk to the public, especially about the TNR and community cats, that's been a huge resource that we've definitely enjoyed. Oh, these are just some of the pictures of the intake area outside, just to show you what it looks like. Everybody comes through the back gate where we're posted outside. We all take turns greeting every single car as they come through. The cars come through, and then they line up outside until they pull through that port area that you see right up there on that top image. That was actually, that is still where the animal control officers drive through and drop off. So 100% intakes, vaccines are given upon intake. Previously, like I mentioned, in those crammed rooms, we were just trying to hold it together. Those animals may not get vaccines 3 days afterwards because we had to just get them into the kennels, and so they didn't get vaccines right away. But right now, every animal comes right out of the car, it goes right to the scale. We've got an efficient little intake area set up in the back. It's very streamlined, it's very quick. It's great for the animal because they're not hanging out in that intake room forever. It's great for the staff, and there's very little thing, like the disease process in regards to keeping everything clean has been very, very good because there's not a lot. It's just the scale and our gloves and our apron. I think that's pretty much it.
So another task that they pretty much gave us when they came over was to create segregation, population segregation. We needed separate areas for the different type of animals that were coming in. Sick animals, healthy animals, puppies, parvo, injured animals. I mean, we had, when they came, I don't know if they remember, it's kind of embarrassing now that I say it out loud, we had a bank of animals that were injured, right in the middle of the busiest hallway you can imagine.
Yeah. People, dogs, everybody was just passing through this injured bank.
They're the ones that needed the most
Attention and
yes.
protection, yeah.
Anyways, that was a past. It's new us now. So now we have incoming. We have rows for incoming animals. We have a room for incoming sick animals, the new animals coming in sick. We also have a separate room for our in-house sick animals because those have to stay separate. 2 different parvo rooms, one for parvo positives and then one for parvo positives that have URI. So it's totally different. And then we have an injured room now. That little bank became, they have their own room, their own little music playing now. And we have a maternity and underage room. And then quarantine, we didn't put on there.
Yeah, so the old intake rooms are now one of the rooms is the injured room, and then the 2 other rooms are saved for parvo and parvo URI. Injured room? Okay, so the snaking method, which they talked about, that is exactly what we implemented. Do you want to talk about this one?
Okay, so they already talked about snaking method, so you kind of get the idea.
Yeah.
Definitely at first the concerns were it's time consuming. How is it controlling disease if we're moving these animals every day and every cage? And another thing was the inventory. How are we going to keep track of it?
It's going to take us forever to update everything.
Anyways, it was confusing at first. We heard it all. We heard it all.
Yeah.
They were hitting us left and right. No. Okay. But
we had to play, they wouldn't have enough time in the morning because they were on a different schedule. There was a number of different reasons as to why this wasn't going to work.
But I got ahead of myself. The staff loves it. The staff loves it. They wouldn't go back. They would not go back. They actually, it's faster to clean. We haven't had any disease outbreaks, knock on wood. And we have better population management. Every animal gets seen, no animal gets ignored. Since you're moving every animal, you can catch, there's nasal discharge, and you act on it. There's no waiting or no dog gets cleaned or that dog was never cleaned. No, every animal gets moved, and it's a for sure thing that every animal gets cleaned and actually attention, one-on-one attention. And then with time, everyone got a hang of it, and now they wouldn't go back.
We're still working on intake reduction strategies. We'd still love the animal control officers to be more of a resource to the community. We would still love to set up an appointment-based owner surrender system. We want to be able to offer more resources. We're not quite there, but we are working on developing a bigger resource center. Deferred intake, we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to help those numbers continue to increase with the citizens being able to help out and keep the animals for a week. Intake line efficiency and team communication kind of bunched together. We have now 2 teams that are working together that have never worked together before, so it's a little bit of a challenge helping them be efficient together and communicate with each other. So those are some of the things that we're still working on.
And something that we learned right now was the cats, we're working on cats, and then maybe vaccinating puppies, upon intake, babies. So.